Well, welcome to this video, and I hope you like it. If you do, click the like button, hit subscribe, and share with a friend. Okay, this is kind of a short one, I hope. It's been a weird day at the end of the day here. Well, towards the end of the day at least. Got to go take care of my friend's critters in a little bit here, so I can't be too long-winded. And maybe even log back onto my work computer and finish dealing with some fires to put out there. Always fun picking up the pieces after somebody else leaves. Warlock. I resemble that remark. It's the Monday before Election Day, right after Halloween with the full moon here. Decided to go with kind of a ghost story of sorts. At least it's a ghost story for me. Not even sure how to title this. But it's about my experiences with breeding reptiles and kind of my love-hate relationship with the whole thing. You know, I've always liked reptiles from the time I was a little kid. I was always out looking for snakes and salamanders and whatever. And you know, it always just seemed to focus on, you know, the reptiles and amphibians mostly. I liked everything outdoors, but I was always kind of focused on that. And, you know, when I was in the military, obviously going out to sea all the time, I couldn't do much. But then after I got out of the Navy and I came back up north, I started getting into things and a little bit here and there. And, you know, still more of the type that would just, you know, catch a couple of salamanders, keep them in a tank. Sometimes I'd keep them over winter and keep them nice and fat and then let them go the next year. And, you know, kind of, you know, the laws just really are written against that now, though. So I kind of started getting out of the collecting something from my local environment and just, you know, keep it for a little while and release it back into the wild, and buying things at pet shops and eventually reptile shows, and eventually got to the point where I was actually breeding things and selling stuff at reptile shows. And during this time, I was living in the Harrisburg area and going to some of the bigger shows out there, and I got to know a lot of the other people in the area, some good, some bad, and some good people who just in tough times did some questionable things. Going back to the laws, it's kind of weird that there are species that are native to Pennsylvania that are in the pet trade, but yet if you live in Pennsylvania, you cannot keep these as pets, or you have very limited ability to keep them as pets. Some of the laws are very weird to begin with. Like, you can have, I think it may have changed in the last year or so, but they had it for a while there that you could have one of any reptile or amphibian, and then I think they actually changed that to where it's one total of reptiles and amphibians, other than certain categories like snapping turtles. But you could have like 15 eggs or larvae of amphibians. So it's like if I have 15 eggs and they grow into adults, you know, I'm out of compliance. you know, because it's written as if you're using them for fishing bait, basically. Which of course may apply to some species, but not most of the things in the category of reptiles and amphibians. There just some things are weird like that. But it just got to the point, you just want to stay away from anything like that, so you start buying things that are from somewhere else. And being that I often kept turtles outside, I would buy turtles that would survive outdoors in this environment, but maybe they're from farther west, or at least, you know, outside of Pennsylvania. And, you know, I had a lot of stuff for a while. I had some stuff that was, you know, I had poison dart frogs, I had the axolotls. I have successfully bred axolotls. That was interesting. Learned a lot from a guy that I met at one of the shows, a guy named, well, I don't want to put his name out there. I'm not sure how he'd feel about it one way or the other, but a very nice gentleman, I'll just call him David, who I met at the reptile shows. And any rate, you know, we have problems with a lot of invasive species, and this is part of what drives it. And it, you know, having the interest in these things, you know, it's so great that you can get a bearded dragon that's native to Australia, or you can get a side neck turtle that's native to Africa, or you can get a you know, certain turtles and tortoises that are from all these different parts of the world. Interesting things, poison dart frogs, all these other little things, and you can keep them in a tank, and you know, it's like a little, looking into a little window into a different part of the world. You know, you can create in this terrarium a little replica with the plants and such of, you know, the Amazon or something. You can also do this to a large extent with tropical fish, which also have had some of the same problems in the warmer parts of our country, and even some of the more temperate parts. We've had the snakehead fish were really popular in the late 90s and early 2000s, and now they're an invasive species and they're illegal to sell, and people are catching them as far north as Maryland at least, and I believe there are some instances within Pennsylvania where they have been found. There's a South American fish called a pacu that looks like a piranha but one size bigger. They get about 18-20 inches. There are some of them surviving in the Ohio River in the thermal waste, basically, from the local power plant, shipping port over here. You know, it was a big deal, made the paper. At first, people thought they were catching red belly piranhas, but it was actually pacu. Less carnivorous, still got teeth. They're actually in the wild, I believe. They eat nuts and other herbaceous stuff, but you know, these fish getting loose and being a potential problem, although, you know, a handful of them living in the warm water coming from a power plant aren't really going to take over the rest of the Ohio River, but just, you know, it's kind of a problem. And there's so much of this stuff out there. And a couple years ago, or maybe it was only last year, 2018 or 2019, there was a lot of cases of people releasing alligators into the wild in Pittsburgh, and people finding them walking down the street. And, you know, there's just a lot of problems associated with it. So I've got this, you know, it's really enjoyable as an enthusiast to have access to these exotic creatures, but there's a lot of stuff out there that just shouldn't be. I knew a lot of people, a close friend of mine who was in the trade also knew somebody that I didn't meet personally who lived in the same general area I did, where you weren't allowed to have a snake over 6 feet long, and supposedly he had a what looked to all purposes to be a normal little tool shed, but that tool shed was heated and held nothing but venomous snakes. Venomous snakes are easy to get. Large boas are easy to get. Things that, maybe the average, tattooed up teenager who thinks a snake looks cool shouldn't really be getting into. And that goes for the alligators too. Alligators get huge. My buddy had an alligator that I think it was 10 feet when it died. He rescued it from somebody else. He rescued several alligators. He kept them the best he could. Sometimes I think he was in over his head a little bit. But there's a lot of people out there who, about $150, you can go to one of these reptile shows, get yourself a baby alligator. That baby alligator doesn't stay a baby for long. And you see this with the turtles too. People will sell them. Oh, if you keep them in a small tank, they won't get any bigger. Yeah, they won't get any bigger because they're probably going to die. They take a lot of care. You got to have the right kind of light, especially for a turtle. A turtle has a lot of bone mass. They have to be able to get the right ultraviolet light, either sunlight or very high quality lighting, that they can generate enough vitamin D for that bone in their shell to grow correctly. And if they're properly fed and they are healthy, they are going to grow to their full adult size. I don't care what the hell you keep them in. I've seen iguanas that had stumpy tails because somebody tried keeping them in a 20-gallon tank. And if their tail wasn't all busted up, these things would probably be 4 feet long. 2-gallon tank's only like 2 feet long. It's crazy some of the things people try to do. And then things like that get mean and people are surprised because, this iguana that's, supposed to only eat greenery or whatever and not be aggressive at all tries to take their finger off because the thing's stressed out from being, locked in a box most of its life. Just a lot of horror stories. And then there's my own horror story, which is what started this. And why I really have a hard time. I got chickens right now. It's part of why I really have a hard time with the idea of getting back into reptiles at all, even though I'm fascinated with them. Because at one point in time I had a lot of them. An awful lot of them. I had as many as, my basement was basically shelves and tanks, and I raised rats and mice to feed the snakes. I raised mealworms. I raised superworms. I tried my hand at butterworms, silkworms, multiple other things. I had night crawlers, you name it. I was raising my own food to feed these things. I was raising animals to feed to other animals on a pretty large scale. I had dozens of snakes. I had the oxalotls. I had dart frogs. I had, probably 50 turtles because I really did like turtles. I had some lizards. A good bit of stuff. I had most of my turtles I kept outside. But I had a couple relatives staying with me. One went back down south. The other one, and these family members, they were originally from down south. Well, spent most of their time down south, and they were always taking care of lizards and turtles and whatever, and always had pets, always had a lot of reptiles, and that were bragging that they knew a lot about taking care of these things. at any rate, the idea was I was coming over here, getting a job. I was going to get a house, then bring them over here and move all my stuff over here. Didn't work out that way. The person who was taking care of my stuff, it started learning they didn't know what they were doing quite as good as I thought they did. Mind you, I'm 4 hours away. So, you know, I tell them a couple more things they got to take care of, and I'm trying to live my life over here. Well, suddenly I can't get in touch with them anymore. And eventually went to the other side of the state, found out they were gone. They had been gone for a while. And most of my shit was dead. The stuff that wasn't dead wasn't in real good shape. So I did what I normally do. I kind of just shut off my emotions and deal with it. That's my way of getting through life. I've been through a lot of shit. So, you know, I buried what needed buried, and I think I gave away one or two things that survived, and I brought, I think, 35 turtles back to this side of the state and put them in an outdoor enclosure. And staying with my parents at the time, and their neighbor was feeding stray cats. And when you leave out cat food 24/7, you attract a lot of raccoons. Like an unnatural population of raccoons in the, you know, like dozens within a square block category existed there. And they decimated the turtles down to 3. Well, actually, I think at first it was down to 5. But they decimated that 30-some turtles in a matter of a few weeks. A couple of months, I was down to where I only had a couple of turtles left. And it wasn't rare for me to come home from work and find a 3-legged turtle trying to hobble across the lawn because what the raccoons did to them, and I just didn't have the means to do anything else at the time. And it's you know, it was bad, but like I said, the way I deal with things is I just kind of shut down my emotions and deal with things in the moment. Like a year after that, I started waking up in the middle of the night with nightmares about it, though. It was a very bad experience, and you know, I kind of understand how people end up in bad situations. I understand how people end up over their head. This is how the crazy cat ladies think they're saving cats from everybody else, then they end up with more cats than they can take care of, and they end up in horrible conditions where they're at. That kind of happened to me in a way, but they were good when I was taking care of them. I thought I had somebody responsible taking care of them for me during this transition, but it went terribly wrong. And, you know, that's just why I can't get into it anymore. And just a lot of the things looking back that I had seen over the years with, you know, dealing with other reptile dealers. Like I said, some of them good and some of them bad. And, you know, just always turn my stomach. You'll see somebody at a flea market somewhere selling baby turtles and selling them with some little contraption like this and saying, oh, if you keep them in this, you know, you keep them in a small thing, you know, they'll stay small. Oh, they don't need anything else. Bullshit. Radiator slider is going to get about a foot long, and it's going to need either natural sunlight or it's going to need, you know, good quality UV giving lamps that mimic the sun. Otherwise they end up with shell deformities, or they just flat out die. And just, you know, I've seen so much bad stuff, and like I said, you still got this love-hate relationship. It's like they're so neat and everything, and it kind of brought it back to me the other day when I was down in Louisiana last week. You know, these little anno lizards. That's one of the first things I ever had that was like a store-bought pet, was one of these little anno lizards. They sold them as chameleons back in the day. And lizards aren't real common in Pennsylvania, so it was kind of a novelty to me, a lizard period. But there's this little animal, you can get him to crawl on you. And he changes color, not very much. I mean, they go from like brown to green. They basically get darker and lighter. They don't really change all that much, and they change as much due to temperature and what mood they're in and other things too sometimes. But you know, it was just this little baby anno lizard. I got it to jump onto my hand and took a picture of him, and I thought that was just the neatest thing in the world for that moment. It just brought me back to being a little kid and having that first lizard. And just, you know, don't know what the solution is. Just, you know, the laws that are meant to protect things, like I said, that they're out of whack. They're part of the reason that the you know, we've got the invasives, which are themselves a problem. And as far as protecting the native species, in some cases things are real popular and vulnerable to over-collecting, but they're not really making a distinction. And you know, I've seen it with rattlesnakes. I mean, there are places where people go to collect rattlesnakes. And I know places on the other side of the state where you can consistently go and find rattlesnakes. And you go out there on a weekend, you will see people hunting for the rattlesnakes. That's how much pressure there is on this particular spot. But they're always there because the habitat's there. And the biggest problem we've got is habitat destruction. If they don't have a place to eat and live and reproduce and hibernate and all those different things, and then it falls apart. You know, they probably killed more rattlesnakes widening Route 22 because it has a nice south-facing slope that probably would be good for denning rattlesnakes. Just the habitat destruction from that probably killed more rattlesnakes than 100 people could hope to kill trying. You know, it's insane. I mean, I've gone through the game lands, and it doesn't happen often, but I've seen where they keep some of these fields mowed. I've seen where they've mowed the fields and just killed dozens of box turtles. Just the blades of the mower just scalped the tops right off of their shells. But, you know, some Boy Scout finds a box turtle at Boy Scout camp and wants to take him home. You know, they want to criminalize that. And I think things are out of whack. I'm not saying we should have a free-for-all on, you know, going out and collecting things. And like I said, the Fish and Boat Commission, who governs the fishing laws, governs reptiles in Pennsylvania. And there's really some weird things in there if you read through their manual. Like I said, it's like, you know, you can have 15 tadpoles, but if all 15 tadpoles survive to be frogs, you're over your limit and you're illegal. Well, nobody thought through the biology. Everybody's thinking somebody's catching tadpoles and using them for bait. Nobody's looking at them in a different context, and nobody's looking at different species. You know, unless something actually becomes threatened or rare, they're not making a distinction between something like a redback salamander that, hell, there's places where they're as common as earthworms. You flip a log and, you know, every log you flip's got half a dozen under it. And, you know, you've got the same limit on that as you do something that, shit, you might search for a month and only find one. So, you know, nobody really put a lot of homework into it, and it's weird when a lot of things that are kind of rare, like say a spotted turtle in Pennsylvania, you know, they're readily available in the pet trade. You just can't own one in Pennsylvania because they're native here. But there's people selling captively bred spotted turtles in other states where spotted turtles aren't native, like Florida or California, or, you know, the whole thing's just out of whack. And then, you know, red ear sliders, which aren't native to Pennsylvania, are actually kind of not a big problem, but they are getting to be a little bit of a problem in some areas. They're an invasive species. They're probably putting a dent in some of the other turtle populations, maybe skewing things a little bit. You know, I don't want to say they're not a problem, but I mean, they're not exactly, you know, Japanese knotweed or the lanternfly or something like that either. It's just a mess. And, you know, I figured I'd give you a little bit of my background. It's kind of a weird subject to talk about. It's not a subject I like to talk about, that's for sure, but it's something that haunts me, so it's kind of a ghost story for the a late Halloween post here, I guess. But at any rate, talk at you on the next one. Well, I hope you found that video informative. Hopefully it made you think, and please click the like button and subscribe if you haven't done that already, and check out the video that should be appearing somewhere around me here, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thanks.